Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Adam White and Rich Allen. We open up the second half of the French football season with a bang, from the transfer window to cup shops as well as Ligue returning. It's all in here in a stacked show, but before we discuss all that has happened in what has been a long week of football, here are your latest headlines. Rewinding back to last weekend to start off with, as the Coupe de France saw the big guns enter at this stage, and some huge victories as well for some lower tier sides. Sixth tier Viry-Châtillon beat Angers. Léon Duchère knocked off Nîmes in a 3-0 victory. Entente won against Montpellier. Second division side Le Havre won against Bordeaux, but the most high profile elimination was Marseille, who were down 2-0 by André. Shocks also littered the midweek Coupe de la Ligue quarter-finals, as we will have new winners for the first time in 5 years, as Paris Saint-Germain's 44-game winning streak in the competition was ended by Guingamp 2-1. Strasbourg knocked out Lyon by the same scoreline. Monaco needed to win on penalties, eventually seeing off Rennes 8-7, while Bordeaux eked into the semi-finals after a 1-0 win over Ligue 2 side Le Havre. Revenge for that the result in the Coupe de France the weekend before. In Ligue matters, Lille picked up where they left off with a 3-1 win at Caen to kick off the year, despite defender Zeki Selek seeing red before the end. Also on Friday night, Reims put on another defensive masterclass against Lyon, but could not hold on to a win, with Bertrand Traoré's deflected strike earning Legon a 1-1 draw. On Saturday, PSG continued their unbeaten streak in the league with a 3-0 victory away to Amiens. Saint-Etienne are on the heels of Lyon, now in fourth place after a 1-0 win over bottom side Guingamp, while Nice got back to winning ways with a 1-0 result over Bordeaux. Sunday saw the Breton derby between Nantes and Rennes end 1-0 to the latter, thanks to a Damien de Silva goal in the first half. Dijon earned a point with a 1-1 draw at home to Montpellier under new boss Antoine Comboire. Toulouse lose at home again as the 2-1 victory for Strasbourg see them maintain their European push, while Nîmes against Angers was the only postponement this weekend due to the Gilets jaunes protest and will now take place midweek on the 23rd of January. In the final game of the weekend, Marseille and Monaco ended up drawing 1-1 at the Stade Velodrome, but that's not the complete story, as Marseille fans will be ruining VAR yet again and referee decisions yet again after Florian Thauvins' possible winner was disallowed for a foul on the goalkeeper. In transfer news, the bottom two have been the busy sides in Ligue 1, with Monaco already bringing in 4 new faces. Naldo, William Vanquer, Fode Ballatore and Cesc Fabregas are all through the door, with rumours that Michy Batshuayi could be the next name joining them sooner rather than later. And that's all for now. But to keep up to date with all the news in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with Ligue 1, and we'll go to the Cup games soon after tonight's match, which was between two sides that are really sort of heading in the wrong direction for both of their sakes, maybe one more severely than the other at least, Adam. But Monaco and Marseille played out a draw this evening. While Loam will always pick on that VAR decision, it was a relatively drab game with few chances really, and was maybe more of a microcosm of both of their seasons so far, really.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it was a little bit a drab. I think with the Velodrome in that sort of mood, it often becomes a bit of a sort of a black hole and kind of sucks all the positivity out. With Marseille so very quick to turn on their players and on their team, I've seen when they finished 13th a couple of seasons ago, there was sort of famous scenes of them playing the Benny Hill theme music from the stands and them holding up pictures of goats. Which is sort of the French equivalent of being sort of a donkey, if you like, a sort of derogatory term, sort of chastising their players. So it quite often becomes like this. And I think tonight was a classic sort of Velodrome sort of evening where all the sort of positivity is kind of sucked out. You know, the fans are sort of encouraging other fans, the ultra groups were encouraging other fans to come to the game and protest. And aside from their poor form, it was still a pretty significant crowd. And I think a lot of those fans were there to air their grievances rather than support their team. And I think that kind of affected the game quite substantially. But I think for Marseille, 100%, it is very much a microcosm of their season so far. Very few ideas. Dimitri Payet on the fringe of the game, unable to get a hold of things and performing pretty poorly, to be honest. I felt like he did virtually nothing in this game. And the onus is always on Florian Thauvin to find something to rescue them, and he's the only player, again, for me, at least at the started, that looks like he was going to create something or just to score or to have that sort of moment that will keep them in the game. And even he was very quiet for the first hour. It was just the last half an hour he really came into it when Marseille were on top, and his goal, for me, which I'm sure we discussed, probably shouldn't have been disallowed. So yeah, for them, absolutely, it was a microcosm of their season. But for Monaco, I felt like there was signs of improvement. You know, they've got the funds to go out and improve their team, and that's something they're going to do both in this window and the next. And you'd imagine that they'll continue to improve with players like Naldo, who's a very experienced, very bullish defender. You know, very good at organising those around you, a leader, playing alongside Badiashile, who was less than half his age. You know, there's going to be improvement there. And Fabregas, although he had a quiet start, grew into the game, and I think he could be an absolutely massive signing for them. And with players like Lopez coming back and Tielemans, perhaps with a little bit of guidance from Fabregas hitting some form, I thought he was decent tonight. His goal was good. There's some improvements from Monaco. So for Marseille, absolutely, I think it was just a continuation of the same. And Garcia arguing with Payet on the bench. I don't know if everybody caught that, but there was a bit of sort of to and fro between them when he came off very justly as a substitute because he'd been very poor. Garcia's in trouble, but for me, Monaco tonight anyway showed signs of some improvement, so hopefully it won't be too bleak at the Stade Louis II for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and it was a frustrating one for Loem, Rich. I mean, they never really seemed to get much together, and both had good chances. I know Golovin had that chance just at the start of the second half, and Payet had a shot where he just drills it into the ground where he maybe should do a little bit better. And they'll certainly be aggrieved about that VAR decision, but it doesn't really relieve the pressure on Rudy Garcia anymore, especially after the result that we'll talk about a little bit later. So there's a little tease for you all. But how important maybe to Rudy Garcia maybe that decision to disallow that goal, because in full time it was difficult to see anything wrong with it. I don't think anyone pulled anything up. In slow motion, that tackle, much like some others that we saw in slow motion this weekend, I'm thinking maybe Paul Pogba's challenge on Dele Alli as well in the Premier League as well. It looks a lot worse than it probably was in slow motion, which makes the decision for the referee that kind of feels like he has to overturn that.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why Marseille fans will see it as a contentious decision. I think the end thing that we need to look at here is was it a foul? Well, I think you put that between two outfield players in the centre circle, and yeah, you probably are giving that as a foul. I think slow motion does make it look worse, but ultimately, Campos' studs, make contact, don't make contact with the ball, and make contact with Benaglio's ankle. So I think, yeah, ultimately it is a foul. I may be accused of anti-Marseille bias there, but I think it is. But I do feel an element of sympathy for Marseille fans. It is tough to see that, but I think looking back on it is a foul. I think the right decision was given there. I think, more to the point, it also would have been very, very harsh, I think, on Monaco. I think, as Adam said, definite improvements from Monaco. I thought the three new signings settled in really, really well. I thought Ballo-Touré especially looked really good down the left. And then, the fact that Ronnie Lopez is now back as well is almost, as cliched as it is, it almost feels like a new signing in his own right. So I think there's positive signs there for Monaco, but it's a real struggle, I think, for Marseille. And they may, I don't think in the grand scheme of things they're going to look back on the decision to rule out that goal as a decisive moment in their season. I think the decisive moment in their season was back in the summer. I think really for failing to recruit adequately, failing to plug the clear and obvious issues within that squad, which now makes the next couple of weeks imperative and hugely important in the grand scheme of their season, because with the sixth place seemingly not going to be going to a European qualification spot this year, with none of the teams left in the Coupe de la Ligue probably not going to finish in the top six, then it does make this possibility of Marseille completely missing out on Europe a very, very real thing, which, considering where they were last season, where they were perhaps the season before, and everything that McCourt has looked to do since he came into since he bought the club, and the sort of Champions project, would be an unmitigated disaster. So I think what happens in the next 2 weeks in terms of recruitment, in terms of Garcia's position as coach of the team, and in terms of the players that are already there that need to really book their ideas up, the next 2 weeks, I think, will be the 2 weeks that are going to shape the rest of their season.
Yeah, especially with a lot of teams play these midweek games over January to try and catch up with what we've missed out with the Gilets Jaunes protests. I mean, looking at Marseille's fixtures, Saint-Etienne away is a tough one with the form that Lever are in and the position they're in at the moment. Away to Caen is maybe a little bit more secure, but they finished the month with a home game against Lille, which is not the easiest game at the moment. Garcia needs results, and those games aren't necessarily indicative of giving them him, but Con maybe is a little bit easier than others, but that's not a favourable gauntlet for them to run. And as for Monaco, really, Adam, you may say that performances are getting better, at least in the Thierry Henry, but at the same time, for his own position, they've brought in a lot of players that maybe signal some good faith in him, but at the same time, Franck Passie's come in as an assistant really to him, and supposedly not under his stewardship, at least anyway, or his advice. And that maybe puts even more pressure on him to deliver results now. And with a midweek game coming up for them as well against Nice in a derby, and then a home game against Strasbourg as well, who are flying at the moment. Again, they need to start getting results to start pulling them out of the mire, don't they?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true in one respect. It depends for me how Monaco are now seeing this season, how internally they've decided to rationalise the fact that they've had such a poor season and that their transfer policy up until this point has been completely wayward. So I think, yes, the pressure is definitely increasing a little bit on Henry to get results given the players they've brought in, because with the tools at his disposal by the end of the window, given that Fabregas, Naldo, Baltore, maybe a few others will have joined, Batshuayi, Pats, as you mentioned, might have come in, you would expect that team to get results. And if they don't get results, then you obviously take it back to Henry, and that he's a little bit out of his depth, and fingers are starting to be pointed. But there may be the situation that they start to think that, given how disastrous this season has been, they can't be expecting to push top six, even though the league is very compacted. You can't see them pushing in even into the top half, really. I mean, well, maybe, but probably not. So they might say that they just write this season off, don't get relegated, build for next season, and then Henry is not under any pressure for the rest of the year, and it's next season, having had another transfer window, that they say, okay, this is where we expect, having had a season to get his feet under the table, having had these players with him for the most part, assuming that there aren't too many signings in the summer or too much overturn in the summer. You've had them for a season, and they know how you want to play, and they should be fully sort of entrenched into whatever this Monaco model is becoming. That's where the results come. So it'd be interesting to see how they play it, because especially if they do not pick up as much as is expected in the second half of the year, you could see him under genuine pressure. But I have a feeling that he might be given a little bit more time than all that. But in an individual kind of case, he certainly will be expecting more from his team in terms of results as the year goes on. But whether the hierarchy at the club feel the same way, I don't know, because you'd have the feeling this Henry appointment is supposedly a long-term thing, that all right, they've had a bad season and the squad has been all over the place and has so many injuries and everything's gone against them, that you'd hope they give him a bit more time than that, given the resources he was given at the start of the year with their very bizarre transfer policy. So it'd be interesting to see how it plays out, but at least in the short term, you'd hope they'd start to improve.
Yeah, and that'll be the interesting thing heading forward, really, for Thierry Henry, because little things still not quite right, maybe in games decisions. I mean, I don't know if it was maybe more of an injury thing that's come out afterwards, but decision to take off Fode Ballatore in that game when he was playing so well, unless it was a fitness issue, which I can't imagine. Joe, he's played loads of games for Lille this season. It seemed a very strange one, but we'll have to wait and see and keep an eyes on it, because we move on really to something that certainly involved Marseille, at least, and that's the Coupe de France shocks, and that they had a massive one as they lost to fourth tier opposition, really, in Andrézieux. Rich, and it was full of it, really. I mean, we always loved this round of the Cup. I know a lot of English listeners love the third round of the FA Cup and the chances for shocks in there. But the Coupe de France in January, when the big sides have to go away to all these difficult grounds, and you always get a shock or two. But particularly Marseille's loss and the win for Viry-Châtillon against Angers as well. Two massive results that you never really see coming.
Yeah, it is a wonderful round, the ninth round of the Coupe de France, just because you get such variety. The Coupe de France has such a huge number of teams. It speaks volumes that we get to the ninth round, and it's only at the ninth round that the top flight teams actually join the competition. We have teams as far as sort of the sixth tier of French football. We of course have the teams from overseas, and we have one left in. At the ninth round from Martinique, who only very narrowly went down by 3-2 at second tier Orléans. It's a wonderful round, and you're right. Yeah, we do normally see some shocks. It felt certainly this year, this round, the shocks actually felt a little bit. They certainly felt there was more shocks, I think, and certainly Marseille going out to fourth tier opposition was certainly the one that caught the headlines, purely because of obviously Marseille being who they are and the history that they carry. I think perhaps the alarming thing for Marseille was that, really, aside from the league difference, the 2-0 to Andrézieux was not flattering them. It was a really accomplished performance. You wouldn't have said there were four divisions between, three divisions between these two teams. Marseille were very, 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 very poor, and it was not a weak team either, which should probably be pointed out. It was not a weak team that Marseille put out. There were plenty of first teamers in there. Thauvin was playing, but Andrézieux made them just they weren't daunted. They showed them absolutely zero respect at all. And in the end, 2-0 was probably actually almost quite kind for Marseille, which seems a ludicrous thing to say, but it's how the game went. It was just remarkable to see, Marseille and the giants that they still are. The troubles that they're in, they are still, one of probably France's second biggest team, with all the history that they've got. To have just gone out in such a miserable and embarrassing fashion was really, really poor to see. But they were just one of many shocks. There were 5 divisions between Viry-Châtillon and Angers, and again, that wasn't overly a fluke result. Viry-Châtillon were very accomplished in their performance, and it really does, I think, speak volumes to how far down the quality can go, because we were seeing really good football from these semi-professional, not even complete amateur teams, all the way down. And there's some really, really terrific stories behind some of these teams that's well worth looking into. But it's a fantastic round of football, and this year we were really treated to some real giant killing.
Yeah, exactly. You can see some of the results and some of the terrific performances. I mean, you look at Léon Duché, who beat Nîmes as well. Won 3-0. It's a really big victory over a Ligue 2 champions and a Liga side, and even teams that managed to qualify through. Guingamp against Stade Pontivy, that was tough at times, even though it ended up being 4-2. They sort of scraped on through. Caen only won 1-0 against Red Star. A red card for the home side really helped push that boat out a little bit further, really. And there's a couple more that, I mean, there's still, even Strasbourg have to face Grenoble on Wednesday, as they sort of had theirs postponed, well, sort of moved back a little bit. And even your side, Rich, Rennes had to win on penalties against Brestois, second division side, and some of the rewards for some of them. I mean, the only frustrating thing for a few of them, Adam, is especially, well, the two big ones, two of the big ones we've mentioned, at least in Andrézieux, has to face Leon Duché, which is positive for them to get a chance of going through to the next round, but a bit shame that they're facing each other. But Entente, who managed a great win against Montpellier, have Nantes to welcome as well. The Saint-Privé, Saint-Hilaire, who are facing Rennes as well. That's a good result for them. Viry-Châtillon look to try and take on another Ligue 1 side in Caen at home as well. It's a magical cup tournament, really, to see what we will sort of get through to. But 5 Ligue 1 sides, it surely piles more pressure on some of these managers, because every single year we see a smaller side get to the semis and even the final, like we saw with Les Herbiers last season. You have to feel like some of these bigger sides think we should be doing a little bit better in what can be a really tricky away games that they do tend to get.
Yeah, absolutely. You would feel like that the strength of Ligue 1 might tell eventually, but it never seems to. I always get the feeling it's in other countries. Don't, when this kind of thing happens, perhaps in the UK, we sort of celebrate the fact that our lower leagues are so strong. But I sometimes get the feeling in France that it's all the opposite, and they say isn't Ligue 1, much worse than we sort of thought it was, because they keep losing to these lower division teams. But I think for the Coupe de France, there's just so many magical things about it that perhaps go for European, in a wider European context, go under the radar. Like the fact that the bigger teams nearly always play away from home is great. When you see, I remember Bordeaux lost at Granville last year, and it looked like they were playing in just like a university. Like they were playing away there when they lost it I think it might be an extra time. When I think it must have been Gorvanek was sort of on his way out. And the fact that the Ligue 2 teams go in a lot earlier than the Championship teams do in the FA Cup. So when it comes to this round, a lot of them have been knocked out either by playing each other or playing third division teams, or they've rested players because the league is much more important, which means you get the lower sides playing each other as well as playing Ligue 1 teams. More of them get through, more of them have to play each other, so they don't play bigger teams, and they get to this sort of round, which is why you end up with Les Herbiers in the final, or third or fourth division teams getting to the quarters and semis on a regular basis, because one, they're capable of beating the bigger teams, as we've seen them time and time again, and two, when they don't play the bigger teams, they play each other. So it's absolutely fantastic fun, and I would say, despite being English and the FA Cup is sort of held up as this greatest cup competition in the world, I would argue these days that the French Cup supersedes it quite comfortably, given how many shocks there are and how much fun it is. And Rich mentioned the side from Martinique that only lost to Orléans, and absolutely fantastic. I remember a couple of years ago, Excelsior from Réunion played Lille and were only 2-1 down in injury time before they went for it and got caught on the break twice and lost 4-1. That kind of thing just doesn't really happen as much as it used to in other cup competitions. So the French Cup is a great advert for French football, and long may it continue.
Yeah, you have to think that some of these smaller sides coming from Martinique and Réunion, how they sort of fund being able to maybe come across if they need to.
Hell of a away trip, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if they do end up having to have one of those sort of games where they have to, say a Ligue 2 side maybe has to face them, or a third tier side getting over there. I hope there's a way of the FFP.
I think actually all the teams that are overseas do actually play their games in France, and actually the French Football Federation actually fund those teams coming across, because obviously we're talking of you're looking at Réunion or Martinique. That's 3,000 miles at least, and that's one way. These teams aren't going to be able to afford that, and arguably why perhaps should they be expected to pay for it? So yeah, there are provisions in place, I think, that teams like that do receive the funding to make their travel to the mainland.
Yeah, super. I thought it must be something like that. I can't imagine they would make them stump up for some sort of fee. But yeah, I think you make a great point, Adam. I think maybe the English would maybe say, well, a lot of us English would say that, oh, but you miss out on the chance of going to Old Trafford or the Emirates or Wembley at the moment. If you get Tottenham, really, already, I mean, that's probably the only mishap of not necessarily mishap, but I suppose it creates more shocks that the big teams have to go to the smaller sides in away games. But would you trade the shock for the day out? I think that's always going to be sort of the balancing act between the two arguments. But I don't think you can really be wrong either way. But another great cup week we had as well, because in the Coupe de la Ligue in midweek, we had some shocks in that as well, which is terrific to see, because we will get new winners to start off with, Rich, and that's because of Gangomp's victory over Paris Saint-Germain. It took 3 penalties to do it in the end. They missed one and grabbed 2, and they were all pretty much penalties. As sort of PSG imploded with bookings in the last couple of minutes for Neymar and Cavani, all arguing. But terrific result for Gangomp that you would hope have given them confidence going into the season. But that blows this competition wide open.
It blows the competition wide open, absolutely. It was an element of good fortune, but also an element of, as you say, PSG really imploding. I think it was 3 penalties they conceded in the final 30 minutes, which is just ridiculous, really. And you have to admire the sort of confidence and self-belief in Marcus Thuram, because he was the one that had missed an earlier penalty. And then in the 93rd minute, decided, you know what, after Ngbakoto had equalised from the penalty spot for Gangop, Thuram decided, I'm going to take this spot kick. And he was quite lucky. It was not a particularly well hit penalty, and Areola, upon looking back on it, might think, I probably could have saved that. But no, it's excellent to see from a neutral perspective. It's going to be nice to see someone else lift the trophy towards the end of the season. And I think also then, as you say, as you look for Gangomp themselves, I think Gourvenec was just looking for that performance following his return to the club that could kickstart their season. And I think we'll come on to transfers, but I think you look at a combination of the transfers and quite possibly this result. I know they lost at the weekend at home to Saint-Etienne, but again, it was a marked improvement in terms of performance from them, that they could use, that win against PSG and maybe a run to the final, and then who knows in the final, is that confidence boost that they need to rediscover some form and sort of take them out of that relegation mire that they're in.
And this is the interesting thing about the other games really in there, because the other side that's come through is Monaco, who will take on Gangomp in the semi-finals, thanks to their win on penalties at what started off as one of the worst penalty shootouts really, but ended quite nicely at least anyway. And then other shock really, I suppose it's a slightly lesser shock, but in a cup game it is, I suppose, for Strasbourg to be beating Lyon. Adam, that sort of knocks out the other team. You would think, right, okay, if Paris Saint-Germain are in, then these are going to go out. And even Bordeaux sort of had to struggle through Le Havre. And it leaves 4 teams that, like we've mentioned earlier, aren't necessarily in the European shake-up, especially the ones in that first semi-final. And we've got Strasbourg, Bordeaux, whom you could maybe argue Strasbourg, if they continue their current form, might be trying to fight for that 6th place, but that looks like it might be lost for, well, it might not be even something that people can fight for now. An interesting semi-finals, and difficult to pick a winner from it, really. I suppose a couple of months ago you might have said Monaco if they weren't in the bottom 2, but now they're in that position. You're thinking, well, it could be any of these 4.
Yeah, it really could. It's going to be fantastic, and I think that the semi-finals, I'm really excited for them, because there's going to be sort of an added level of competitiveness to those games, because all 4 of those teams will be thinking, we could win this, and we could get into the Europa League for next season. I know Gangon won cups of late, and they've been in the Europa League, did really well, got to knockout round, and only now he lost to Dynamo Kiev when Gourvenec was there in his first spell. Bordeaux are desperate for a way back in with their with their investment from the American group in the summer. You know, they need to be in Europe if they're going to adopt this model of you would imagine of sort of buying younger players and selling them on. It's a good sort of shop window. Monaco could have a bit of a get out clause this first Henry season, as we were talking before. You know, they could find themselves with the Europa League spot and come into next season with an improved team. You know, that could be really, really good for them. And Strasbourg, who are having a fantastic season up in 6th in Ligue 1. They might finish in top 6 anyway, but it'd be great to have a club like them who are such a big team and so well supported, and such a credit to French football. It'd be great to have them representing the league in Europe. So all 4 of those teams will be going hell for leather for these semi-finals, and I hopefully it'll come through in the games, and they'll be exciting and tense and close. For me, I maybe there's something of the narrative in this, that Henry might somehow manage to win a trophy despite this terrible start to the season he's had with Monaco. That might be quite nice. So maybe Monaco, with this improving 11, might be a good shout if they focus on it and admit that they're not going to get through anywhere in the league. That would be quite good. But maybe Bordeaux on form and quality might nick it. But it's so close. It's going to be great, and I really look forward to those 2 games.
I don't think after I've watched Bordeaux the last couple of games, I'm not really certain they maybe got the gusto for it, because then you point to Strasbourg, who are in fantastic form and have got some good players, and they've got a chance. Monaco certainly out of the 4 have the quality on paper. If you were just football's never played on paper, but if you put it on there, you would see them as favourites, and then maybe you think Guingamp
beat PSG.
And they have the freedom on this sort of tournament of going, well, there's nothing to lose in these kind of games, even if Gourvenec decides, okay, maybe I need to rest 1 or 2 of them really for the games that are coming up, especially because it sort of sits in the middle of a load of games that they're getting midweek. They might be knackered, so they might need a couple of reinforcements, but maybe at the same time that gives them the freedom to push on them and try and win this one. They've been in cup finals before and won cup competitions before, so it's not unheard of for a side like them. It's going to be really interesting to watch now. I suppose everyone can switch off the fact that sometimes maybe we ignore the Coupe de League thinking, oh, Paris Saint-Germain are going to win this, but now it's going to be certainly one for you to catch up on midweek. It's starting on the Tuesday the 29th of January. On to transfers now, because the window is open again, and that's certainly been a topic for a number of teams, but especially for those ones at the bottom. We've already spoken about some of them that have made their debut tonight for Monaco. Rich, they've been the busiest so far, bringing in Fabregas, Ballatore, Naldo all appeared tonight. Vanquer, obviously on a loan deal as well, did not make an appearance, and there's rumours that Batshuayi is pretty close to joining them on a loan deal as well, coming back to Ligue 1, which will cause the ire of Marseille fans, if anyone else, at least anyway. Good acquisitions on their part. A couple of experienced players in there, especially in the form of Naldo, people with Ligue 1 experience as well as a creative player in Fabregas. Is that the kind of men that they need to bring in quickly?
Absolutely. I think these are excellent signings for Monaco. You look at Naldo, he's been there, done that, huge amount of Bundesliga experience. Quality defender. He's able to come in. Certainly in the 2 games that he's played so far, he's looked comfortable. It's going to perhaps ease a little bit of the burden as the experienced defender off Glick, who I think has really struggled of late. It's going to be another senior presence in what is a fairly young squad. And as we saw in tonight's game, in Benoit Badiashile, Badiashile had a really good game, and again benefiting from playing alongside someone with the know-how of the game and the experience that Naldo's got is terrific. Ballatore, I thought he's a really good signing. He's had a strong start to the season with Lille. Again, I can only use tonight's game as an example, but he was really good down the left, as I'd said previously. Fabregas, we know of his quality. We know he perhaps isn't quite the player he once was, but he's going to add experience to that midfield vision. He's going to add some ability, and he's got, and the creativity he's got will be hugely important. We saw it in just a couple of glimpses during the game tonight. There was certainly a pass that he delivered really late on, which almost created an opportunity for Thielemann, who didn't quite took it away. But I think Fabregas will probably be arguably be the single most important signing that they'll have made. I think Wenger, he adds experience in midfield, and then if they can bring in Batshuayi as well, as was evident tonight, a lack of a reliable goal scorer. With Falcao, I know reasons that he's missed the game of late are not, are very unfortunate with the passing of his father and illness tonight. But Fabregas is a proven Ligue and goal scorer. I sort of struggle to think why he's not made a success of any of his moves since leaving Marseille. But if Monaco can bring him in on loan, that's another excellent signing. It's going to give them a real presence up front, and all of a sudden, then Thierry Henry has got a starting 11 and a couple of fringe players that actually can take this team forward again and start to move them away from the base of the table.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the thing they really need to be happening, because the other side that have done a lot of business is Guingamp. I mean, there's little bits and pieces from Montpellier. They've brought in Ristic and Suarez, and Con have brought in and Dom on loan from Reims. That's pretty much it. And Shoji to Toulouse. But Adam, Guingamp are another side that need reinforcements, and they've brought in some Ligue 1 experience again, and Didier Ndong from Sunderland, and Papi Djilabodji as well from Sunderland, but obviously was out of contract as well. They've also brought in Larson, who did play at the weekend as well, from Bromby. A couple of interesting signings, really. That steel that maybe they're missing at the moment with the struggling at the back, at least anyway. But experience, are those the right kind of players that Gourvenec needs, not just for now, but if they manage to pull themselves out of the mire, that players that can be players they can use going forward as well?
Yeah, they're interesting ones. I think they're definitely a bit of a gamble, given the way that both Djilabodji and Dom's careers finished at Sunderland. They've both been out of the loop for quite some time. I think, and Dom's been back in Gabon and hasn't played at this sort of level for quite some time. And Djilabodji was on at Dijon, perhaps, was it last season, maybe, or even the season before now. But he was good there, so he may be a little bit more of a sure thing. But again, he won't be fit for a few weeks at least, and Dom definitely won't be. So although both those two players have league and experience and a sufficient amount of league and quality for a side at the bottom of the league, they're probably decent gambles to make, but they remain gambles nonetheless. It'd be interesting to see how they turn out. I think Ndong's an interesting one in particular because he has a lot to prove, and he left Lorient far too early for me, and was not ready for the Premier League, and it showed. And obviously it sort of coincided with Sunderland's sort of deterioration. But he has a lot to prove, and given the way it ended for him at Sunderland, with his contract being cancelled and him not showing up for pre-season and him falling out with them, he's got to prove. So if he can get in the team and get playing, he might prove hungry and prove to have some sort of effect on the midfield. Alexandre Mendy's an interesting one as well. They could have signed him as their wild card signing, where another French team can sign from a French team can sign another player from another French club outside the window, signing from Bordeaux, who's obviously very successful there, or relatively successful. Vary's pushing it. Relatively successful under Gourvenec the first time round before leaving for Bordeaux. It's kind of a very Gourvenec signing. I remember him signing Sankare from Bordeaux because he sort of knew him and knew how to get the best out of him. And although Sankare has been up and down at Bordeaux, it was the kind of thing that Gourvenec likes to do. And he'd only spent half a season at Lille, I seem to remember, Sankare, before going to Bordeaux. It's a bit of a weird one, but it's just another player that he knows, and he knows how to get the best out of. So hopefully he'll prove an addition as well. And Larson was very good at Bromby, as far as I understand. Could be a really good addition. Sure, out that defense, can play further forward, and he could prove an interesting signing. That it might be the sort of situation where he moves on later on in the year, perhaps, if he proves successful and it makes some money out of that transfer. I don't know, but he could be an addition in the running. So a few gambles, but ones that you would hope are worthwhile and could well pay off. So hopefully Guingamp will keep in it for the rest of the year and won't be sort of sucked into that Ligue 2 trapdoor too soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And one real departure so far, there's not really been others other than Ballo-Touré really leaving Lille, which I think makes a lot of sense, really. It's not necessarily a very good player, but not necessarily someone they're relying on, while also allowing them to get some money in, which is desperately needed still, even though Pepe may be someone that looks at, maybe not this winter break, at least anyway now, but maybe in the summer. But the one big one, Adam, that I know a lot of British listeners will want to hear about is Timothy Weah, who's heading on loan to Celtic as well. He's only played a couple of times really for Paris Saint-Germain, and he was well down the pecking order really with obviously the main two stars really, but when you add in Di Maria plays there if they need to, or Draxler can play there if they need to, or even Choupo-Moting, and even further down the line, and Nkunku as well. He had a lot really riding on him, but this is maybe the perfect chance for him to show what he can do in a good environment where players from Paris Saint-Germain have succeeded in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really interesting move. You forget, given that Timothy Weah's name has been around for such a long time, that he's still only 18. He's still a very, very young player. And given the promise that he's shown so far at PSG, playing in the youth league setup, where he did relatively well there, and then breaking into the team under Unai Emery, although he didn't get too many chances last season. When he did, he looked lively, sort of played either up front or off the right-hand side, and looked like he had ability. And listening to him speak this week, he's very, very seems anyway, very level-headed and very focused young chap. So he could be a really good addition for Celtic. I think for him, though, it's the classic 18-year-old striker with ability that he's obviously going places, but he remains very, very raw. And when you look at that Celtic team and you look at the players, as you mentioned, that have, like Odsonne Edouard, who's there, I'd argue that he's not at the moment on par with Edouard. The way he's been playing at Celtic, he's become pretty much ever present in that team and done really, really well. He's been injured the last couple of weeks and only come off the bench, but he's really has proven himself there. And he's a couple of years more developed than Tim Weah, but it's one of the things that will develop towards the end of the season. I think that this is exactly the kind of proving ground that he needs, because having dropped out of the PSG team at the start of the season, he was very prominent in pre-season, and then he was dragged off at half-time in that game away at Gangon, where PSG were poor in the first half and unlucky not to be behind at the break, and they think they did go 1-0 down eventually. And he hasn't made an 18 since then, and that was what, mid-August. So he clearly needs game time, he clearly needs consistency, he clearly needs to play at a, obviously the Scottish Premier League isn't the highest level, but at a decent enough standard where he's going to learn things and be tested. And I think by the end of the season, we might be saying he's superseded Odsonne Edouard, and he'll come back to PSG, and maybe another loan in league and next year could be great for him. So really interesting signing. Hopefully he'll develop, and we'll see him score some goals at Celtic Park.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's going to be exciting one, I will say, at least anyway, for you Celtic fans. It's always great seeing a young player come through and play some football. He does have a bit of his dad's swagger sometimes. It'd be great to see if he can do something like that. Rich, just before we move on really to some managerial change that's happened in Ligue 1 since the break, what we always like from yourself, and if you don't follow Rich on Twitter, it's Rich_Allen at 85, because he's always great at scouring these French websites and the French news for some rumours. Is there any juicy gossip that you've really seen over the last sort of week or so that you want to share with us, Rich?
I suppose that the main one is the one that was actually from tonight with Abdoulaye Doucouré. He was on Canal Football Club, which is obviously a big TV program in France on Sunday evenings, and he made an appearance there. So he'd made an appearance a couple of weeks ago, I think, where he just expressed that, obviously he's familiar with PSG. He's aware that they're supposedly interested in him, that he loves going to Paris because that's where he's from, that's where his family is. He then made an appearance in person tonight and made some, frankly, quite bold statements, leading off with that he thinks he is going to be leaving Watford, that the club know his ambitions and know that he wants and will get their support in moving on to the next level. He says that his ultimate goal is still to be playing well for Watford, but he wants to be moving to a Champions League team. He says if there's an opportunity to join PSG, of course, that he'll look into that. Almost probably the biggest clue that he's sort of making this plea to PSG was when he was talking about where he likes to play. and he was saying that he likes to, he can play at number 10, a number 8, and a number 6, but that his favourite position is, lo and behold, exactly what PSG need: defensive midfielder. But he said this winter they're going to look at opportunities, but that he was reiterating really that he's not going to let his focus drop from Watford, but ultimately he's going to use playing for Watford well as the launch pad to playing for a club in Europe, and perhaps just to try and make it so it wasn't quite such an obvious almost PSG interview. He was saying that staying in England was something that he was not going to be ruling out, that remained a possibility, and also a move to Italy. But ultimately, his first priority is to move to a club in the Champions League. So, with PSG so heavily linked with sort of 4 or 5 defence in Europe, but obviously with finances on a slightly restrictive level, it remains to be seen whether Doucouré is a possibility, or with the rumours that they've got a contract in place and an agreement with Frankie de Jong of Ajax, and it's just a case now of getting a fee agreed, which they expect to be about 75 million. So it's a case of whether they act now to bring someone like Doucouré in, or Idrissa Gueye from Everton. Both will probably be around the same sort of expenditure of 40 to 50 million, or do they just leave it, risk a big risk in terms of Champions League, but sort of go all in then for the De Jong capture in the summer. So we'll be certain to keep an eye out on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think depending on financial fair play, really, they might try and do both. Really, I think they might try and maybe get a Doucouré in or a guy for this sort of, like you say, for the Champions League this summer at least, anyway, because it's only going to really help them bringing someone in like that who's not had Champions League play, and someone that will be really good for them next season, at least anyway, as part of the squad, and then go for Frankie de Jong as an extra midfielder. Really, I know Adam's talked about how good Draxler's been as well, and the likes, but with Rabiot out the door, with midfield really being a problem position for them, really, anyway, especially when you have to say that while Verratti has been pretty fit this season, it's not been the case the last couple of seasons, really. They do need to cover there, and having a couple of options and Stokes in the fire is never a bad thing, at least anyway. Just before we head to our snapshots this week, Antoine Kombouaré has rejoined Ligue pretty quickly after his dismissal at Guingamp. He's popped up at Dijon. It seems like any sort of contract dispute was sorted out over the winter break. Adam, it's a good appointment from most point of views, really. I mean, they got a draw as well at home to Montpellier, which is nothing to be sniffed at, really. Even went ahead in the game as well. So great result for them to start off with Kombouaré, but he's exactly the kind of man that will be propping Dijon up and make them more of the sum of their parts.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a good sort of firefighting appointment from Dijon, and a pretty sort of obvious one too. Given that their form had deteriorated after a really good run last season, when we talked about them a lot on the pod, where they were fantastic at home, and they actually had the 5th best home record in the league last year after the top 4 of PSG, Monaco, Marseille, and Lyon. And they're really exciting to watch. And Olivier Delalleux was there for 6.5 years and did fantastically. Dijon aren't a particularly big side. This is their only their second run in Ligue, and they had only one previous season before he got them promoted. And I would hope that Dijon, he's done Olivier Delalleux has done enough at Dijon to warrant a return to Ligue 1, given that he played attractive football last year with limited resources, and they even started this season relatively well with 3 straight wins. But obviously, we talked about it a little bit before, but it seems that his message sort of failing to get through anymore, and it really fell away. But hopefully, after such a long time at the club and so many good performances and good results over the course of several seasons, you hope that he would be on the Ligue 1 shortlists, at least in the bottom half, for when they are next looking for a manager. For Kombouaré, I think he's very well respected, and he's been around a long time. Managed PSG and a number of others. Lens, I seem to remember when they got relegated under extenuating circumstances. And he is a type of coach. I don't want to be of a cliche to say like a French Sam Allardyce or a French Tony Pulis, but he will do a similar job. That he will stabilise the club and he'll get them organised, and they will. I'd imagine they stay up now with him in charge, and it's really interesting to see what their long-term plan is. I don't know that, although Kumbai did a great job at Gangon to start with, and obviously his best players all over the summer, and I don't know that Gorvenek's can be able to save them without significant additions. Although we talked about a few they've brought in, but whether that's enough remains in doubt. What Dijon's long-term plans remains interesting. Whether they expect Kumbai to take them on back to sort of mid-table or above mid-table, where they threatened to at times last season, or whether they, as I said, they are a very small team and by comparison to so many others in the league, and whether they expect just to maintain their league and status is huge for them. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but he's certainly the right appointment.
Yeah, because we're starting to see maybe the table start to shape. I mean, after we've sort of caught up with all these games, we'll see it a little bit clearer. But you're looking at Amiens and Caen and Angers and Toulouse above them, still not really completely far away. I mean, 2 wins dramatically changes them from where they are to around about mid-table sort of position, especially although their goal difference is maybe holding them back a little bit. But that kind of thing can change very dramatically, very quickly if Kumbai can get some results. Just to finish on our Liga and snapshots, and I'll start with yourself, Rich, this evening. What is your Liga snapshot?
Mine's very quickly just on VAR. Over the last couple of days or so, we've had some issues, shall we say. I think we go back to the Coupe de la Ligue game between Lyon and Strasbourg, where I think Strasbourg were awarded a penalty that went to VAR and was given via VAR. And I think actually, even when you look back at all the replays, you still come to the conclusion, don't quite know how that was given. So I think that we've got issues where even with things going to VAR, the right decision's still not being made. And then we look at, I think today, certainly the three of the games that were played today had issues with VAR. We obviously touched upon the Marseille one and the contentious decision tonight. Albeit I think ultimately the right decision was made. I think what we're looking at, and it probably runs across all 3 of the decisions today, is it's just taken too long. The decision in the Marseille game tonight, the goal was scored, celebrated, ball back in the middle, about to kick off, substitutes had been made, and then the sort of nod comes into the referee to review it. That's taken too long. There was an incident in the Toulouse-Strasbourg game today where Toulouse were awarded a penalty via VAR, and it took nearly 5 minutes from the issue being referred to VAR to the penalty being given ultimately and then scored. Now, we shouldn't be having 5 minutes wasted on something like that. So that still needs to be ironed out. And then there was the Nantes-Rennes game today. I will try and remain bias-free on this, but there were certainly, I think, 2 instances, if you were a Nantes fan, you would feel slightly aggrieved, weren't at the very least more formally reviewed, and perhaps signal to the referee that he should be reviewing them on the touchline, where there were potential foul. There was a foul, I think, by Mexer, arguably, and then almost immediately after that incident, there was a potential handball as well. So there's still VAR issues, and unfortunately, it doesn't take it. You can have 10 excellent uses of VAR. It unfortunately only takes 1 for everybody to pile on the criticism train, if you like, with VAR. So the fact that we've had sort of 3 or 4 in the space of the last 4 or 5 days just raises the issues that, we're halfway through the season now and it's still not been, put in as a smooth, efficient process. So still, I think, plenty of work to be done with VAR.
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. Great to point out, really, and nice to see that, despite the evidence that you had a round bias on our awards, that you've shown a little bit even on a Breton Derby day. Adam, what's your Liga snapshot?
Mine's I had a few in mind, but we kind of touched on all of them over the course of the show. But somebody I've been wanting to sort of praise for a while that I haven't really had the chance to because it hasn't really come up. And that's definitely not based on performances this week, to be fair, but over the course of the season, he's somebody that has perhaps at Paris Saint-Germain, who's gone a little bit under the radar. And we've talked about Neymar and Mbappe obviously a lot, and Union Draxler I've mentioned a lot, but someone else I've been really impressed in that I sort of wanted to draw to our listeners' attention, whose form has skyrocketed, in my opinion, over the last 6 months. So is Angel Di Maria. There was a period under Unai Emery when the season Monaco won the title, when he got sent off away at Nice. PSG had beaten 3-1, and he'd spent the second half of the season complaining about not playing in the right position, playing very poorly, looked like he looked disinterested, looked like he was going to leave in the summer. Inter Milan were linked heavily, and he had a really, really poor season. And the player that started very well at Manchester United, and obviously fantastic at Real Madrid in periods. For me, I loved watching. He was one of my favourite players in Europe over the course of that sort of those few seasons. And at the very start of Manchester United career, he was brilliant. And that player had evaporated at Paris Saint-Germain despite a really, really good start. Under Unai Emery, been really, really poor, as I said. But this season, since and to some extent last season he was good, but this season in particular, now that he's got competition, he's been quietly brilliant pretty much throughout the campaign, and not just in Ligue 1 games, but in Champions League games too. He's played in a number of positions without complaining, which obviously is a bit of a prerequisite for a professional footballer. You should be able to adapt, but even so, he's made the most of playing on the right, on the left, almost as an attacking midfielder. He even played at wing back in one game against Angers and did the job. Did pretty well. He's played deeper in midfield at times, and he's playing with an intensity, sort of a little sort of waspish intensity that I haven't seen from him for quite some time. And he's getting about teams and defensives, getting on the ball as much as he can, picking some brilliant passes, and contributing to pretty much every area of the team. And he signed a new contract at the start of before Christmas, which just shows that he's gone from the exit, pretty much to being one of the most important players. And Thomas Tuchel's really put a lot of faith in him, and he's returning to the player that helped Real Madrid win the Champions League and helped Manchester United start really, really well. And he was sort of on course to being one of the best players in the Premier League. Obviously that deteriorated quite quickly, but he's back to Di Maria that everybody outside France perhaps thinks he still is. We talked about Thiago Silva being back to sort of the Silva we imagine him as, this brilliant centre back, and he's playing like that. But Tuchel's also got the best out of Angel Di Maria, and I think we talk about Neymar and Mbappe and there's sort of front three with Cavani, but really it's a front four, and a lot of the time Di Maria has proven himself just as useful as the rest of them, if not more so. So it'd be interesting to see how his form develops over the course of the year, and he could be crucial to them progressing in Champions League. So it might not be an original opinion to say Angel Di Maria is good at football, but he has been really, really good this year. So fair play.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I want to just very quickly add to that, Adam, is I wonder if maybe because he's not quote unquote the man like he had to be at Manchester United and had to be in his early start of the season career at Paris Saint-Germain, where he started excellently again but dipped off for, you could say, 12 to 18 months, but has sort of recovered since there's players in front of him, maybe playing a little bit more reserved, having more options in front of him, and not being the star attraction really makes him express himself as a better footballer, because he has been much better, and does remind me of those days in Real Madrid where he even played in centre midfield for a good spell, didn't he? But my Liga snapshot goes to the most organised team in Ligue 1 this season, and they showed it again on Friday night, and that's Reims, who were terrific against Lyon. Really, they were really unfortunate to come out with a draw, really, in all honesty, because a lot of Lyon's chances ended up coming sort of from outside the box more than anything, and that's what they force you to do. A deflected goal has earned Lyon a 1-1 draw they probably didn't really deserve at the end of it, and they're just really good at what they do. Reims throughout the first 45 minutes at least anyway were tremendous on the counter. For one thing, they make great decisions, they're incisive with their passing, they don't mess about when they go into that side of things, but as soon as they lose the ball, everyone drops behind the back. And what I really enjoyed is, depending on where, it shows you how good the management has been really this season, and David Guillon, because the way they set themselves up when the opposition have the ball, they get back in formation, it sets the back four, and then there's the two wingers, and then the midfield three as well. So there's obviously the striker staying up as the one, and the two midfielders would sometimes, when the ball's further down the line and further into the final third, they'll drop into almost playing as wing backs and almost have a six as the fullbacks pull inside, and it absolutely bamboozles teams every single week. And you could see Lyon just not able to work out where they could pick it out. They were thinking, do we go wide and trust some of our players to attack them? But there's not the space to do that because they're almost double teamed out there. Do we sort of slit through inside? But then because the fullbacks have pulled inside, there's almost a surrounding there as well. They couldn't work it out. And it's been all season long that Reims has done this, and they do it to perfection. There's not a man that sort of changes it. And like I said, the only reason Lyon got through it is because of a deflected goal. Because even when they do get through, they've got Mendy to get past, who's been sensational as well. And credit to them. And if you can't see them getting anywhere other than mid-table, I mean, with a couple of lucky results, they might even push on for Europe if they can really try. But credit to them and showing you that there's more than one way of playing football, and absolute coaching masterclass from David Guillon, and long may it continue. That's all that we have for this week. My thanks to Adam, Rich, and all of you listening at home. Do join us again for the preview show on Thursday. But for now, a bientôt and goodbye.